The question on hand is the future of the arts, and it comes from a sort of a pessimistic essay I wrote a couple of months ago. There's nothing that we in the arts like to do more than sit around and predict the doom of whatever arts we're involved in. However, there has been in the past few years some disappointing statistics, particularly as a result of the downturn in the economy. So I'm going to start out by reading some of those. Charitable giving in the United States has declined by 11% over the course of the recession, although it's up 2% from its all-time low, so a little bit of good news. In 2009, unemployment in the arts field was estimated at 12.5%. That's considerably higher than the national rate, which in 2009 was 7.2%. In 2009, the CEO of Nonprofit Americans for the Arts said that 10,000 arts organizations were either out of business or preparing to go out of business. The NEA survey of public participation in the arts in 2008 found that audiences in the performing arts were declining and growing older, with attendance rate dropping for almost every art form except galleries and museums, which had actually enjoyed about a 3% rise. Which I don't think keeps pace with the actual rise in population, so it's not that good news. In 2008, attendance had declined almost 5% from the previous survey, and actually 15% since 1992. Even more disappointingly, there's been a long-term pattern of decline in arts education in the schools, and in my own profession, there's been a decline in arts criticism, particularly as budgets for newspapers have shrunk, and newspapers themselves have gone out of business. So let's start out by asking our guests, how are things in their own field in the arts? And we'll start on that end while we get Joe set up again.
Max, as you mentioned, things actually, in terms of attendance, are actually looking very good for art museums. And at the MIA, our attendance hovers around 500,000 visitors a year, depending a little bit on special exhibitions that we do year to year. But I'm happy to say that the bulk of the attendance for the MIA comes from people coming to see the permanent collection. One of the challenges of a lot of art museums is getting on the blockbuster hamster wheel, that you have to keep feeding this beast that expects bigger and bigger exhibitions. And those exhibitions, needless to say, get more and more costly, particularly with insurance. And so something that I really value about the audience here in the Twin Cities is how much they appreciate and enjoy our permanent collection and come back again and again to see new installations we have in the permanent collection.
James?
Well, I feel fortunate this past year we also actually saw some audiences going up. But our strategies are different in order to do that. What we've been doing is more collaborations, things that we can sort of spread the way we market what we do and the potential audience that we have. We did something with the Schubert Club last year that really made a big difference, having the live music, a gamelan orchestra, doing more multimedia. Another thing we've been really looking at is how we, it used to be in dance, you could do a mixed bill of 3 different dances and you would just say spring season and people would show up and then, trust that they're going to like what you do. And there's still people who will do that. But more and more people are looking for, what is the hook? What is the thing that you're marketing? What's something with name recognition that you can attach somebody's experience to get them into the theater? So we're trying to look more strategically at how we leverage those opportunities.
And Jeff?
Well, in spite of those statistics, our numbers are staying very solid and strong. We're 5 years in the new building this year, actually this week. 5 years in the new building. Time flies when you're having fun. But we predicted certain numbers when we were going in, and we have actually met those numbers. The difference is, and it's a difference that we've noticed very particularly since 2008, since the kind of financial crisis really hit, is nobody wants to pay full price. Discounts are the order of the day. So even though we're getting the numbers, our numbers have not suffered at all. The income has gone down because people, and everyone expects discounts. And we had a huge success with 39 Steps, directed by Joel Sass last year. It was a huge hit. You couldn't get a ticket for it. And several people were waiting, and they actually emailed our marketing department saying, damn you, we've been waiting for the discounts and we clearly aren't getting any, so we're going to have to pay full price. So I think that the statistics may tell one thing, but I think, as we're saying here, we don't see any decline of interest in the arts. What we do see, of course, are big shortfalls in how we fund them and how we continue to provide the kind of quality that we all can do.
Well, let's talk about funding for a moment. First of all, obviously during a recession, people are going to be a lot more concerned about how they give their money away. And it also feels like there's been a retraction in terms of government spending on the arts as well. How has that affected you, and are there strategies that you've come up with to work your way around that?
I think, in the initial economic crash, we all reduced our budgets down. It was, for all organizations, such a dark period, and in particular because there was no upside. I couldn't say that we saw any way that we could ask our donors to increase their support, because nobody knew where the bottom was and how long, and our most generous and loyal supporters were looking at their own situation and how long things were going to continue. And I'm sure, like my colleagues on the stage, we're finding that confidence is returning now, so that's the good news.
Yeah, the similar feelings there. For us, our strategy is pulling back. Just trying to, how can we cut the budget to match? And a lot of us, we're basically a touring company, so a lot of our year to year, it's always a little unsure because it's how much touring do you get booked for the following season. So then we look at that and then we base a budget on that. So there are those factors in there. But our strategy is going forward is more people give to people and things they feel connected to. And we're trying to find more ways as an organization to bring people into our studio, more ways to get to know the people who enjoy the work we do, which is something I love to do, and also gets people to feel like they're a part of the creative family and helps us, sustain the work in that way.
I think James is absolutely right. People give to what they feel connected to, and if when it's talking about strategies, I think we have to all, the people in the arts, have to recognize that we have to work harder to be part of the community, for the community to feel both invested in the organization and invested in the individuals. We have a lot of wonderful, wonderful donors and people who have stayed faithful with us even through the recession, and we try and find more and more ways to connect those people and, of course, to bring new people in. As Kaywin says, when we were faced with the crisis at the end of 2008, all arts organizations had to retract. We took $5 million out of our budget in the 2009-2010 season, and it meant that a lot of people lost their jobs, and it meant that we could do fewer things. But as the things have changed and moved, we've made a very clear decision that one of the strategies is we're going to sort of grow our way out of this problem. We're going to put on more work, and we're going to have more activities and engage more artists and engage more local artists too. So there's a balance to be found here, I think, between what the expectation from private donors is and what the needs are from the state. And of course, it would be completely wrong to say that this state has not been generous in terms of its public donors. Public funding rather. The Legacy Amendment of 2008 was one of the most extraordinary things I've seen in my years involved in the arts. That people made a decision to add to their tax in order to fund the arts and the environment. I've heard of it nowhere else, and I think that we should all be enormously proud of what was achieved there, and that, I will absolutely say it clearly, that saved our bacon. And I think the bacon of a lot of organizations. And that's why we really need to make certain that the legacy is protected and that the arts are protected within the legacy, because there are, as we all know, reasons why people might want to reallocate, but the arts have benefited enormously. And the fact that legislators and the people in a referendum actually decided that the arts were important, I think psychologically was one of the biggest boosts we've had here in many years.
Let's talk about audiences for just one moment. A large concern, particularly in the performing arts, is the sort of phenomenon of the graying of audiences, that nationwide audiences seem to be aging and not being replaced to an equal extent by younger audiences. I wonder if that's consistent with experiences in arts organizations here in the Twin Cities, and if there's anything you're doing specifically to address it.
I'd say actually our bigger challenge is managing the age range of our audiences, because in our annual Intercept surveys we've noticed that our average age of audience is decreasing. It moved from 46 to 41, but we serve the entire spectrum. And the way that a younger audience uses and connects with its art museum is becoming so vastly different from that of an older audience, and we want to serve everyone. And so our challenge within our fiscal means is to try to serve the needs of that incredibly broad spectrum. When we look at the habits of millennials and how they connect with organizations and use the museum, it couldn't be more different from the older audience that we serve. And it's a exciting challenge, but a challenge nonetheless.
I think in dance, it's not so much trying to maintain what we have, but it's how do we build it in the first place. Dance has not traditionally had a huge audience here in the Twin Cities compared to the other art forms. And I think one of the reasons is because people in this town, because the arts have been so wonderfully capitalized, think of an art form in reference to a physical place, a structure. And there hasn't really been a place to be a focal point. And I'm very excited with the Cole Center opening and the Goodale Theater, we will be starting to perform there in the fall, is going to be the first time that the dance community has had a high-profile place to get in front of the average person in the Twin Cities. I think most people don't know that we have it's probably about the third most vibrant dance community in the country. If you look at the variety, the amount of companies, it's really an amazing community, but most people don't know it exists. So I think we have an extraordinary opportunity to develop audience in a way that has just not happened here before.
Well, as a member of the graying generation, this thing comes up all the time. The audience is graying, the theatre is dying. It's been dying since the Greeks, and it will continue to die as the fabulous invalid that it is. It will continue to die forever. And the other thing is that the graying audience tend to be able to pay a little bit more than the younger audiences, and that we like them for too. No, I don't think that this is a problem here in this community. Yes, I know that you came along to Arsenic and Old Lace and there was nobody under 40 there. Yes, we all read that, and that may have been true on the day you were there, but there were certainly on other occasions. And one of the things that I think is really wonderful as far as theatre is concerned in this community, we have one of the best children's theatres in the country. A remarkable institution that has survived all the various years of turmoil and financial difficulty and everything to be still a training ground for not only young actors but also audiences. And we find again and again and again that people who have gone to the children's theatre or come to see Christmas Carol when they're kids and have actually engaged with the theatre through their youth, that when they get through that child-rearing phase that takes everybody out of social life, the theatre becomes once again part of their life. So I don't have a problem at all. I think when James mentions the Cole Centre, that's a fantastic thing that's going to happen in this community for the dance community, and to have these new things coming on stream at a time of financial difficulty, we're extraordinarily fortunate.
And let's move. Oh, yes, go ahead. Now let's talk about artists for a moment. Joe, you had mentioned the fact that the Guthrie is working with a lot more local artists, and also I know that there's a program there for young actors that's combined with the University of Minnesota. I'm curious about, in general, what your arts organizations do to specifically encourage new work and new artists.
We seem to start, so I'll continue. Of course, at the MIA, we have our incredible Minnesota Artist Exhibition program, which continues to thrive, and we're very, very proud of that program. In addition, we've started some new projects. For example, we collaborated this year with MCAD and did a project where we juried a student process and invited 2 students in to do a work of art at the MIA. And they actually created this fantastic installation of sound in the one of our top rotunda areas. So it sounded like somebody was in bare feet running around the museum. And it was so good that I got to the top of the steps and I knew exactly what I was going up to listen to. And I looked around to see who on earth was running in bare feet in the museum. So that was exciting. And then, of course, we've launched a new contemporary initiative at the MIA under the great work of Liz Armstrong. And as part of that, we're really experimenting with the ways that contemporary art and contemporary artists can spark kind of new observations and new inspiration from the permanent collection. And so we call it our Art Remix program. And we've dotted contemporary works amongst some of the contemporary, or the permanent collection. And I really loved watching, for example, we have a painting by Kehinde Wiley, a younger African-American artist, of 2 Afro-Brazilian boys in our Baroque galleries. And Wiley was very influenced by Baroque artists, and so he paints very much in that style. So the painting kind of feels Baroque, but visitors who walk through know something's different in this space, and they stop and they really look at the Wiley painting and they look at the Baroque pictures, and they're usually trying to think what on earth we were thinking of to put these pictures together. But we put a comment book out, and I've noticed in reading the comment book that about 70% of the people really love the installation, and 30% really hate the installation. And I'm okay with both. I want people to stop and look and think and care. And so I think working with living artists has been a really great expanded initiative at the MIA lately.
Well, for my company, really, we're not one of those, what I refer to as museum piece ballet companies that's doing classic.
It's right next to you.
No, there's wonderful. That's an important role. But my company, the focus is the creation of new work. We'll do once in a while the pas de deux from the classical thing, or the Balanchine piece. But really, it's me creating new work and dancers from the company. And we have something called our Ballet Works project that we've been doing for about 14 years, where we every year have dancers from the company and people invited from the community to create new work on the company. And that to me is really important. And I recall still, when I was starting out, how difficult it was to find this instrument. A ballet company, highly trained dancers to work on, is a very rare commodity. And I felt so fortunate in the opportunities I had, and I felt our responsibility to be able to give that back to people who are trying to learn their craft. So.
Well, separating out new work, which is a very complex thing in the theatre, because there's always kind of issues surrounding new playwrights versus experienced playwrights, second productions. But in terms of actually working with young artists, we've established 2 programs at the Guthrie that have been enormously successful for us. One is a BFA program that we do with the University of Minnesota, and from which we graduate. For the last 10 years, we've graduated nearly 20 actors per year. They've gone all over the country. Many of them have stayed here in the community and not only been part of the Guthrie, but have also formed other companies here locally and been part of other companies locally. So we feel that connection with the University of Minnesota is a vital one for us at the Guthrie in terms of developing new talent and creating another generation of people for not just the Guthrie, but for the American theatre. We also have a summer program called the Guthrie Experience for Actors in Training, and they have spent 8 weeks with the Guthrie, engaged in various different activities within the theatre, classes, and finally do a presentation in the studio. And I'm delighted to see they're here with us tonight. So we take great pride in the fact that we do have a very largely a local casting. I would say about sort of 80% of our casting now is local. And if you look, for instance, at the current production of God of Carnage, which is in the Maguire Proscenium, all of the actors there are local actors. So we're working closely with a lot of local artists. We're developing new artists. I think the issue of new plays is an entirely different thing, and I don't know if you want to get into that, but that's a whole different area.
Well, perhaps during the Q&A period we can come back to that, but I have one final question. and then we'll open it up to questions from people in the audience. And that's it's something that I'm particularly interested in my own column, which is something that I feel like perhaps connected with the rise of social media is an aspect that's always been part of the arts but seems to be increasing, which is the experience of arts not just as an aesthetic experience but also as a social experience. And that a lot of arts organizations are moving towards making either their physical space a space that can be used for a social experience, or making the event itself a social experience. So I wonder if you've experimented with that, and what you've done and what your experience has been with it.
Sure, and it sort of ties into my earlier comments about changing audiences and the ways that people participate with the institution. Social media has been, again, like my colleagues, I know, a very successful, expanded initiative for the MIA. One of our recent programs is that we host a monthly program called The Curator is In, and we, through Facebook, put all of our curators in a room together, which is quite a concept to begin with. And I always say it looks like a curator trading floor. We put them in our boardroom with laptop computers, and they're sort of shouting and talking, and people can send in questions real time. And so they ask a question, and curators actually can talk in the room about how they want to answer the question, and they might get several answers. So you have 5 curators. And because it's all online, we might have a curator who's doing work in Germany, and he suddenly plugs on and is also answering, and so it brings them all together. And one of my favorite questions, somebody emailed in and asked, if you could spend the night in any one of your period rooms, which room would it be? So they're really great questions. And so it's a way for us to really make our curators more accessible to the public, which is something that people are really interested in. All of our curators have actual profiles on our website. I have been in the process of hiring a lot of new curators at the museum, and in doing it I found that there's nothing harder to find in the world than a curator. That I might hear word that somebody was, the curator at the Chicago Art Institute, but you can't find that person. They don't want to be contacted. There's nowhere on their website can you find a phone number, an email. And if you go to our website, we have these great photographs of we allow the curators to present their personalities in their photographs, and have all this sort of information. So, making our curators accessible through social media is one way. And then one other final point, we have our third Thursday evenings where we're open late, the third Thursday of the month. We're open every Thursday late, but the third Thursday we program with lots of events and lectures and what have you. And not too long ago we had a third Thursday that was devoted to speed dating. And I saw this and I thought, oh God, what are they doing now? We've really lost our soul. But it was really fantastic, because what we did was when visitors arrived for Third Thursday, we had several sheets of images of works of art, and they would pick which work they liked the most. And so if you picked the Chihuly, you wore the sticker with Chihuly throughout the evening, and so somebody would come to you, you like Chihuly? I like Chihuly, and start a conversation. And at 8 o'clock, everybody met by their work of art, and we had a hosted discussion with our educators, and then taught them some French pickup lines as well. So it wasn't a wasted evening. And that's an example of using an event and kind of putting a spin, but really it was a traditional evening where people were learning about art and engaging over the collection, which is what the number one reason people actually come to museums is a social experience. They usually come with somebody else, and so it's continuing the ability to have those social experiences.
I can't match the speed dating. That sounds good, though. We're trying to find more ways. In our studio, we're developing into a performance space as well. We'll be able to have black box, sort of performances, and it's a way to get people closer to the work, and then a way afterwards to be able to really talk with them and have more of a social experience with the dancers, with the people who are in the audience, and I think that can be a lot of fun, and it also gets us to something that's going on now in the world, the whole user-generated content that is going on in so many aspects of the arts, and finding ways, how do we bring that into dance? And so having some ideas about how, one idea I've got that I'm spinning out into the future for myself is like, give us your move. And people can, through social media, do one move. And I'll pick moves and actually blend them into a ballet. And they can want to come and see if their move made it in, Things like that. Ways that we can, get people feeling like they're a part of the process and understand what the process is. So we're trying to get, I think you have to be ever more creative with your creativity in order to keep making it go forward.
Well, theatre, like dance by its very nature, is a social activity. I mean, people have to gather together in order to see theatre. So, and in the big blue building that we've created, there's lots of places for people to gather together, and they do, socially, informally, and so on. So and we have a lot of post-play discussions, and we student matinees, and so we're constantly engaging with our audience in different ways. But the whole social media thing that's arisen now, that's a whole different kettle of fish altogether. I mean, I would be the last person in the world to understand. I don't understand a lot of it, I have to say, being of the greying generation. I don't get, but a lot of people do. And for our Facebook, for instance, I think we have over 10,000 people on Facebook. 25. There you go. We have 25,000 people who go on every day, and don't ask me. And I think it's obviously a terrific marketing tool, and I think it's a terrific way for people to communicate, and I love the idea of the curators all in a room with their laptops all talking to each other, or the speed dating. I personally have a real love-hate relationship with this whole thing. And Julie Taymor, actually, the director of Spider-Man, at the theatre conference in Los Angeles this weekend, she talked about that. While she was trying to create this work, she didn't have the privacy of creating it. Once they went into preview, which of course on Broadway, they go into preview as soon as they can, she didn't have any privacy to create that work. Every day, somebody on the blogosphere, or whatever the tweety-twatty things, or whatever those things are, they were saying, this sucks, this is terrible, this is awful. And I know that several of friends of mine who are directors find the intimidation of that. It's bad enough that we have to, on opening night, people like you come along and judge us, and that's okay. We deal with it in our own way. We've little dolls we stick pins into at times. But before you open, when you are trying to put the work together, and we're in the final stages of previews for HMS Pinafore, which opens on Friday. If somebody had seen that on the first preview on Saturday night and gone on, they may indeed have done. Don't tell me if they have. They may have gone on and said, "This sucks. This is terrible. Don't go and see it." So this bothers me, I have to be honest. So while I think there's a tremendous advantage in social media in lots of ways for theatres and for the arts to communicate more readily with the public, I think this should be a two-way street, and I would love to see people in these blogospheres, is that how you say it? But I'd love to see people being a little more generous and giving to allow artists the opportunity to finish the work.
If I could jump in there, though.
Yeah,
I agree with much of what you said, although one thing I have learned, my staff has encouraged me to consider, is that the audience usually corrects itself, and so when somebody writes, "This was terrible, don't go and see it," there's usually 6 people afterwards who write, "Oh no, you're wrong, such and such," and so the discussion does actually become moderated by the common sense of the crowd, even though you have some fringe people.
I think that's probably true, that there are those who love it, but it's more, and I suppose it's more the psychological effect on those creating the production that I'm talking about. It's a very delicate time as you come up to opening. People are vulnerable, particularly when they're trying to create something new and different. And I think that's what I'm saying is the cruelty of the anonymous blogger can hurt a great deal, and not just ego, and ego is a vital thing for everybody. It's not just ego, it's actually the creative process that sometimes it can hurt, because the producers, the Spider-Man's a very good case in point. I mean, the producers panicked because this was coming at them hot and heavy, and they were demanding changes. And I think Julie Taymor is one of the great theatre artists worldwide. I think she's an extraordinary artist, from the work that she's done in off-Broadway and the work she did sort of in alternative theatre through to The Lion King, through to the movies. I mean, she's a real major artist, and she was sort of torn down And I just found that kind of, and I haven't seen the show, so I don't know if it's good, bad, or indifferent, but I just think that there's a vulnerability about the creation of art, whether it's performance art or it's visual art, that in some ways you can easily destroy. And it's not to say that criticism isn't important, it is, and once a play has opened or a piece has gone before the public, then it's fair game and we have to take whatever lumps we get. But before it opens, I don't think it's fair. Sorry.
Very good. Well, why don't we open the floor to some questions? There's a microphone right over there if anybody wants to walk up to the front. You can ask of anybody up here, or if you have questions for me, I'm available as well.
I'm just commenting on Joe's comments about Julie Taymor and Spider-Man. I just think that what she did here, and I think all those of us here in Minneapolis have to know that The Lion King started here. And The Lion King was really kept under wraps, and it was at the Ordway. And by the time The Lion King hit Broadway, it was a sellout, still running. And so, frankly, I've written to Julie, say I think you should come back to Minneapolis. So, anyway, that's what I think we should do. And but I agree. But I know, Joe, that in the beginning, at least with Julie and a lot of the other things, in previews, the critics are not allowed. And so with what Julie did on Broadway, to be on Broadway, the critics were coming in, the blogosphere was there, she really opened herself up, as opposed to being in Minneapolis, where that didn't.
You can turn that around and face the folks if you like.
Hello there. My name is Frank Sontag. I'm the Executive Director of the Kohl Center.
Can't hear you.
My name is Frank Sontag. I'm the Executive Director of the Kohl Center. I moved here in February from New York City.
Oh, God.
Thank you for the plug, James. And it's true, you folks are going to have one of the greatest venues for dance on the planet. We open September 9th. I don't have a question, I want to make an observation. And that is this. You Minnesotans are spoiled. You know, people here are respectful and they pay attention, and I'm astounded by the fact. It astounds me that I can go to the Ordway with 1,100 people and no one's cell phone goes off. No one's face is glowing because they're texting. Everyone is paying attention to the art on the stage. And that doesn't happen by accident. You know, it's the result of an engaged citizenry and people that are educated and a vibrant cultural community. And I continue to be delighted by it. In terms of the future of the arts, what worries me is these little screens that everyone is carrying around. I worry about the day when the joy of a collective experience in a live performance and the electricity that comes as a byproduct of that is erased from the collective consciousness. I can imagine the day not too far from now when kids say, they really sat in a room filled with total strangers and waited for a curtain to rise, at a prescribed hour. How quaint. Because it's all about me. They can dial up what they want, when they want it. And so my concern for the future is that as a result of these little screens that are ubiquitous, we will lose the joy of a live performance.
I actually think that will enhance the live performance, and that we'll only see increased participation. I don't ever worry that people looking on a little screen or their computer they'll think that replaces going to visit the museum. I think it will spur their interest and curiosity and allow them to actually dive deeper.
I sure hope so.
Yeah, if I can actually tell a little story. I went to the Walker Art Center recently for the John Waters exhibit, and there's a piece that's been part of the Walker for ages called Suor de Mondokane by Yves Klein. It's a painting that he did for a movie called Mondokane, where he painted it on the screen. I went with some friends, and I told them about this, the fact that the making of this had been created for video. And then I realized that I could actually use this to show them the video. And so I pulled up YouTube and pulled up the video of the image being made, which we watched, and then at the very end of it, the models who make the image step away and the image is completed. And I held it up, and there was the completed image at the moment of its completion, right in front of the physical image in front of us. And it was just an extraordinary experience. It was as though we could peek into the past as a result of these little devices. So I think there is real possibility of it expanding our experience of the arts.
We actually use iPads in the galleries now with our docents. So they're able to use the iPad to actually enable visitors to see really, really close detail on a work that maybe is embedded in a plexi case that they can't actually get close to seeing, and show the actual process of a work of art being made. So again, enhances the visit.
I think this is also, though, a really important reason why we need to keep doing the outreach to kids. We're serving about 5,000 to 7,000 kids a year, getting them in. If they have that seminal experience of an art form when they're young, they'll understand what it is then in reference to when they see the thing on YouTube. They'll know, well, this is just a small replica of it and not what it actually is. And I think it's important that we connect them early to these experiences.
Yeah, the spark, because we all had it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I want to follow up on something you said, Joe, about the issue of new plays. And the question I have, and maybe this is where you would have gone if you'd done it, is the question of risk-taking relative to financial pressures. And I know in the cooking community, I've heard some of the chefs in town say that Minneapolis and Twin Cities in general is a place people like to go out to eat, but it's not a place for great risk-taking in food, that it's relatively conservative about risk. And I'm curious from all of you and your experiences what your thought is about how much risk-taking the local arts audiences will tolerate, and what effect it has on your decision-making, given your pressures to fill the house.
Could I take that? I don't think any art form can continue to grow and develop without risk-taking, without it being constantly a process that changes by the nature of the people who do it. And so it's inevitable and essential, in my view, that people take risks. It is, of course, you have to balance that with, exactly as you said, Joel. I mean, you've got to balance it with the whole idea of financial responsibility. I mean, each of the organizations here and all organizations have to be fiscally responsible. It simply makes no sense for us to go into deficit and to create deficits. It both sort of alienates funders, and it also eventually destroys organizations, as we've seen in this community. And that's where I think all of us have to create that balance. But 2 years ago, we made a decision. I've always felt that having 3 theatres in the Guthrie, we had an opportunity to really celebrate the idea of a playwright, and a specific playwright, and we chose Tony Kushner. And the vast majority of people who came didn't really know who Tony Kushner was. They had heard of Angels in America, they'd seen the movie, but they didn't know the breadth of Tony's work or what he was like. Now, I asked him to write a new play for us, and he did. Those of you who saw it will remember it. It had one of the longest titles in the history of the American theatre. And he wrote it in the, much of the grey hair that I currently have is as a result of watching him develop that day by day with the actors, with the director. It was a terrifying experience for all of us. And indeed, the subject matter of the play, the themes of the play, the way the play evolved, some of the language in the play, I thought, we will be getting 20% houses for this. It not only was a remarkable experience, ultimately, but it sold out. And it was one of those extraordinary experiences for all of us. And it did, I think what it did for me personally was to say, we have to find the right formula, i.e. right playwright, right actors, right director. And then, if the work is good, an audience in this community will take that risk with us. And so I think we learned a lot from Kushner, from the Kushner celebration, about the use of our spaces to promote the idea of contemporary work, and the use of our spaces to develop relationships with writers. And we're going to continue to do that into the future. On the other hand, we have to be careful, and it would be completely irresponsible to say that we could do 50% of our work could be new work. I mean, James talked earlier about you need to have pieces or artists that audiences respond to and know. And the same is true in the theatre as it is in dance. You have to have those pieces that people know, and then to have something that you can then break out with. And one of the reasons we have the studio in the Guthrie is for that very purpose. So I think that this audience will take, provided the work is good. If it's not, we have a discerning audience, and I think that what was just said there about the educated audience is absolutely right, and we are very fortunate. This is the best audience I've ever worked for. I've worked in many parts of the world, and this audience here is the best I've ever worked for. The most perceptive and the most intelligent, and also the most willing to work with you in terms of new work.
I would absolutely agree with what you said, Joe, although add that it doesn't just have to be new work that's risky. To my complete and utter surprise this year when we had our big exhibition of Italian Renaissance paintings from Venice, our billboard image was Venus rising out of the sea, naked from the waist up. And who knew that a nude painted in 1500 would still get phone calls? We had quite a few angry phone calls that there were naked people on billboards. And that's where actually I felt like I want to say, have you ever turned the television on? There's so much worse on TV, but I agree with you, this is an audience to...
Some years ago we did John Guare's play, 6 Degrees of Separation. And there is a scene in that where a young man, and we timed it, 15 seconds of a nudity as he ran through the room. More emails and letters and phone calls about that, people cancelling subscriptions. Because of 15 seconds of male nudity, get over yourself.
All of you are responsible for extraordinary institutions in this community, which I found out when I came here from California, full of myself. And then I found out what a real arts community could be, as opposed to one that just talked about it. But all of you have been involved in various ways in not only bringing in students to your organizations, but encouraging the education of students. And I've been involved in that for a long time as well. So what I want to sort of say and ask, by making reference to the things you've done, at the MIA you have had a program called Visual Thinking Strategies for many years. You have worked with students in the Minneapolis Public Schools. I know that, and Lord knows you have. Somewhere in your life you also were hooked in, and something grabbed you in your art form or in your field of criticism that has never left you. And that is the moment that educators look to provide for students. And Visual Thinking Strategies, for instance, does that. It goes to the very basis of what do you see, why do you think you see that, can you tell me what, how you think about it. Dance is the same. How can I learn fractions? Well, maybe you can do a 4th note, maybe you can do an 8th note, maybe you can do a 32nd note, and then suddenly every child moves, every child wants to move. We beat it out of them somehow, but we shouldn't. And everyone tells stories, and everyone plays, and everyone can reflect in the way that you are talking about. So in the midst of chaos in many school districts and cutbacks and so on, there are many, many people who want to have those collaborations with you. No matter what, it's vital to them because they see what happens to children. And I would like to know where you are, all of you, in your thinking about how you find that not just the spark in a particular child you might raise up, but how you share the gifts that you have with those.
I want to start because I'm a product of the Twin Cities. Having grown up here and then spending 15 years in New York, I felt really good to come back here because I feel like I got that love for the arts from this community. I think it's an amazing arts community, and I think that it has a tradition of being progressive and pushing art forms forward, and that made me feel comfortable to come back here because I felt that's what I was trying to do, and I felt like, okay, I can be a part of this community and drive my art forward. But then how do we then we have the responsibility to get the kids in there, and I think as you alluded to, the arts are being taken out of the schools. I'm excited by the fact that so much research now is showing how the arts are fundamental to creative thinking, to how we process the world, and now, you know, the Fortune 500 companies are looking people with those skills to be able to synthesize things that are actually learned from the arts. So I'm very encouraged by that. I haven't seen them put the dollars back into the schools yet to do it, but I think there's a lot of impetus now for us to be able to make the case to make that happen.
The Institute of Museum and Library Services just came out with a really fantastic study about the needs for 21st century learners. Excuse me, it's on their website. I really highly recommend everybody look at it. And it talks about how content is so much less important now. It's becoming a creative problem solver, working collaboratively, and you know, making the point that authors like Daniel Pink have made that a lot of the jobs that children in school now will be doing when they're adults don't exist today. So this, you know, post-industrial world model where education is about teaching people skill sets to do certain kinds of jobs, the technical skills, has changed. And what better place than the arts to learn skills about creative problem solving and collaboration?
This is a huge subject and a huge area of concern. Yes, all of those things that we're saying here are true about the arts cultivate creativity, the arts create opportunities for young people to explore their imaginations, to what I've termed in the work we're trying to do, call it the survival of the spirit, because so much of contemporary education and educational practice is, somebody said we beat it out of them. So much of it is about destroying the individual spirit and creating some kind of collective thinking. And I think that the arts help people to really identify themselves, who they are as human beings. But it won't be done because some corporations put some money into the schools. It won't be done because individuals like all of us here believe it. It'll only be done by government. It'll only be done when and if governments recognize that it is their responsibility not only to the present generation but to future, to developing the future. And it breaks my heart. It's not just here in the United States, it's all over the world. The belief that somehow if we keep cutting arts education, we keep cutting these things out of the curriculum and we bring it right back to that somehow or other people will pick up the pieces. They won't. State funding, government funding for education and for arts and education has to be restored and developed and increased. The best speech on arts funding I ever heard in my life was given here in this city about a week after I arrived. Sally Pillsbury here invited me to hear then Governor Arne Carlson speak at the Children's Theatre. He gave a speech that was extraordinarily passionate about why the arts were important and why government needed to fund the arts. And he talked about his father and his father's love of opera and the fact that his father, who was an immigrant into the United States, had no access to those operas that he loved, but heard them on the radio and gave money to support so that others would have the opportunity. And the way he crafted that speech and what he told was that it should be everybody's right to actually have access, not just to the idea of the arts, but to the arts and to culture. And that's why I think we should all be urging legislators and indeed at federal level, this is a crisis and it needs to be resolved if the future is to have the kind of potential that I think is seen in other areas, technology and science.
I'll answer very quickly, and then we'll have time for one last question before we all go and get cupcakes. Prior to our government funding arts to the extent that it should be, I'm also a product of the Twin Cities arts scene. I attended classes in making art at the MIA when I was a boy. I went to the Children's Theatre and later on to a lot of the local theaters, a great deal of stuff at the Guthrie when I was younger, went to the orchestra, and those are a lot of my memories from when I was a child and informed me to this day as an adult. So until we can make sure that arts are funded in the schools to the extent that they should be, take your kids out to the arts and take your grandkids out to the arts. That stuff will stick with them. Okay, so our very last question.
Actually, it's not a question. So
Okay,
somebody else can ask a question. I'm an elementary music teacher, and I just want to say everything that you guys say is exactly perfect. And I just returned from, I was at NetRoots Nation that was here in town the last 5 days. And when I would tell people I was an elementary music teacher, they'd say, oh, you're so lucky. We don't have music anymore in the schools. We don't have, and the next one, we don't have any music anymore in the schools. And we still have it here, it's still strong, but they would like to take it away, I think. I don't mean just music, I mean the arts.
Thank you so much. Okay, and let's have our last question.
Well, I'm Susie Hudson from Whitebread Center for the Arts, and what we're seeing at the local level, I mean, the three of you are in some of our premier arts organizations, but without our future artists, without the kids getting that spark lit at the local level in the elementary education, we're losing our artists of tomorrow completely. And we started to hear from our high school instructors that they had seen the first generation of kids coming through school without a single visual art class until freshman year. So not only have we already lost those kids, but we've also lost the parents who don't really know how to advocate for the arts because they never knew their kids were passionate about it because they didn't have the opportunity. So, you know, I'm as much as I believe government should be supporting it too. We've waited 15 years for arts to be brought back at the local level, and it's not happening. And you know, it's a crisis because we are losing our artists, and you know, we're starting to bring art into our elementary schools. We've got a partnership on the local level now. We're providing art experiences for every child at the elementary school now. But I want to challenge the you know, the leading organizations too to work deeply with the smaller nonprofit arts organizations, because we need that sort of heft behind us, and we need that kind of ability to cultivate that audience for the museums of tomorrow and the theaters of tomorrow and the dance of tomorrow. And it has to, you know, we are extremely fortunate in Minnesota, but this network is what's going to save it and what's going to keep that cultivation of tomorrow. And I guess I'm not sure I have a question.
But a very good comment. Thank you very much.
Can I say one thing in
Absolutely.
response to that? You know, I think Joe makes a great point that we need the government to step up, but I think there's also, what you're talking about is the grassroots. I think they need to work hand in hand. It won't really happen until the government gives it that stamp and funds it big, but the government won't respond until there's a swell of the grassroots, the people making a difference, the people making choices to make it happen anyway, that has an effect. So it has to come from both sides, I think.
Well, thank you all for coming out. Let me take a moment to thank our guests, Joe Dowling, James Sewell, and Kaywin Feldman. Thank you so much for taking the time, and we have cupcakes over there. Thank you, everybody.